In this full-length tutorial, I'm going to show you how to paint a flower using one colour, Moonglow by Daniel Smith. But don't worry if you don't have this colour, I'm going to show you how to make something very similar later on. Let's go! So as always, I've taped down my watercolour paper like this and done a really simple line drawing. I'll explain how you can access the free traceable line drawing and the photo a little later on in this video, and all the materials I'm going to be using will be in the description box below. Today I'm using a cold pressed paper which has a texture to it. This makes the disbursement of the grains within the paint a little bit easier, so I recommend that you use that. You can see me adding water to the petal on the anemone flower here because we're going to be working wet in wet by dropping in the mixture like this where the water has been applied. You can see how the paint disperses really naturally into the water, giving it this really soft blur which is ideal for this kind of painting, and it shows the granulation within the pigments. You can see how I'm using the tip of my brush to apply the paint to the pencil line and gently blur it into the damp paper. Just using the tip of the brush to move it right up to that pencil edge to give a sharp edge where we need it. I really recommend that you watch this video all the way through so that you can see how the watercolour process evolves and get past that tricky phase. I've switched brushes to a number 2 size spotter here, and you can see me gently move the paint into the pencil line where it's slightly come away as it's drying. The brush I used at the beginning was a number 6, and I'm pressing down quite lightly on the paper to lift out some highlights within the petal. We want the petal to have some gentle shape and form, and this gives it the illusion of some light pushing through. You can see how easily the paint lifts out with this brush, and I'm just adding a tiny bit of this colour into the middle like this. I'm continuing the process on all of the other petals, just applying the water, letting it settle, and then applying the paint. So my reason behind using one colour, quite apart from wanting to try this extraordinary magical colour for myself, having read about it on social media groups, is that using just one colour will really help you focus on the switches in tonal values, making your paintings come to life. You can see me once again just lifting out some of the highlights within the petals. This is really easy to do, and just by curving that brush you're given the illusion of the petal having a gentle curve within it. Having completed the process on all of the other petals and making sure that my paper is dry, I'm using a number 2 size spotter to enhance the areas where the paint has naturally settled. This will create the illusion of the folds and the veins within the flower. At this stage, the Daniel Smith Moonglow is mixed to a slightly thicker consistency to enhance the areas that are already applied on the first wash. You can see me working around the little highlights that we've lifted out, and just wiggling the brush like this to create the illusion of some texture within each petal. So moving on to the next petal and applying water like this, and once again, once that water has settled into the paper, I'm dropping in the Moonglow, making sure that I give it a little mix with my brush because it's a granulating colour and it does separate within the palette. Just following the natural pattern on the flower as I did on the first wash. You can see once again that by using this number 2 size spotter, I'm able to get right into the corners and manipulate the paint around on the paper to make the paint go wherever I want it to go. You can see already how this beautiful anemone flower is jumping to life and looking three-dimensional, even at this early stage. And just continuing the process on all of the other petals. Wetting the paper and dropping in that paint, working around the highlights that we've lifted out already. And continuing the process for the entire flower as before. Now, making sure that everything's dry, I'm switching to a smaller size brush once again to enhance the initial washes and adding a little bit more detail at this point. And make sure that your paint is dry before you apply any detail. Once again, you can see how I'm using the pattern that is formed within the petals to create some shape and form. This time painting in some veins where I feel they are needed, looking at my reference photograph for guidance. If you are enjoying this video, do give me a thumbs up. It's a free way of letting YouTube know that you're enjoying my content and I can continue to give you these tutorials every week. So I'm now using a slightly thicker mix of Daniel Smith's Moonglow to once again enhance the pattern that we've applied onto the flower. I'm always blending the paint into the paper with the brush, as you can see. Because this is a cold pressed paper, the blending process is slightly more tricky because of the bumps on the paper. But I think you'll agree it's worth that little bit of extra effort. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that we have a free traceable line drawing and reference photograph. You will find these in our Facebook group, details of which will be in the description box below. We are a fast-growing community, so do consider joining us there. At the start of this tutorial, I mentioned that I attempted to mix my own version of Daniel Smith's Moonglow. So let's take a short break and see how I got on. Okay, so let's see if I can replicate this wonderful colour. You can see here that I've swatched out a few samples on my watercolour paper here. So I've just decanted a tiny bit of the paint from the tube into a little pan here so that I can store it away a little safer later on. So first of all, I'm going to begin by swatching out the Moonglow on this cold press paper to see if I can get exactly the same or as near as to the colour that you can see here. So I'm mixing Moonglow to a slightly thick consistency and applying it into a graduated wash on the watercolour paper. Now, I didn't do too much research for this because I wanted to just see if I could mimic what I saw within the colour. And I'm sure there is a correct recipe to follow. But Moonglow is a mixture of, I think you say, anthracnose red, ultramarine blue and viridian grey. Now, because I always like to use what I have within my palette, I didn't have a few of these colours. So the colours that I've chosen to mix my recipe are viridian, which is what you can see me mixing up here, and it's mostly viridian with a tiny bit of quinacridone red. I thought that might be similar to the red that they have said, and that's almost similar kind of hue to the Moonglow as it is, and I decided to add a tiny bit of French ultramarine and a tiny bit of Payne's grey, and we'll see how that looks on the paper. Now, all the colours that I'm using are from Winsor & Newton because I think different brands have different properties. For example, viridian in one brand may not be granulating, and within Winsor & Newton it was, so I wanted to use that to have the granulation. So let's just see how this performs next to the original Moonglow that I've applied. As you can see, it's slightly more red in colour, so I'm toning it down a little bit by adding a little bit of Payne's grey. And you can see when this settles into the paper that that's a very close match to the original Moonglow, and I'm fairly happy with that. You can see how it keeps separating within the palette here, so you do have to keep mixing it as you do with the original colour, and you can apply another wash on the top like this. So I'm fairly happy with that, so let's cut back to the tutorial. So do try that for yourself and see what versions of this colour you can come up with. It really was quite an interesting experiment and I really enjoyed doing it. So back to the painting. As you can see, I'm now making progress with the central part of the anemone, just painting around the filaments and the stamen and anther like this. I'm adding water to the centre and dropping in the Moonglow like this to give the illusion of there being texture within the central part. Now that this colour is in place, once again I'm going over and enhancing the detail within each of the filaments and stamen and completing the process. When everything is dry, I mix a slightly thicker mix of the Moonglow colour, and I'm now using a fine brush to enhance the outside edges of the petals like this, adding some veins and some detail as I go along. Really making the most of those little gaps within the paint and outlining them like this to make them look deliberate. You can see how this really makes the painting sing and come to life. Just carefully outlining those little gaps. if you are enjoying botanical painting and you want to level up on your botanical painting game, you may want to join us over on our Patreon site, details of which will be in the description box below. Every month we put up a brand new full-length tutorial to enhance your watercolour painting skills, so do consider taking a look and joining us over there. So now that the hard work is done, we can just enhance those details as before, going through petal by petal, adding some detail and veining where we think it is needed. And we will just continue this process right until the end.